100,000. That's the milestone level that still has Bitcoin bulls celebrating. So, what does that record mean about the current and future state of cryptocurrency? Here to talk more about it is Global Head of Research for Bitwise Asset Management, Matt Hougan. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. All right, let's talk about this milestone. Bitcoin reached 100,000 for the first time ever. What do you think that means for the current state of cryptocurrencies?
It's great to be here. I think it shows that crypto is developing as a major asset class. I think if you back up even 1 year or 2 years ago, there were still questions about whether Bitcoin would really matter to the global economy, whether it would be adopted by institutional investors, whether it would matter on the macro scene. Fast forward to today, you have Bitcoin at $100,000. You have giant firms like BlackRock building huge businesses in this space. You have politicians talking about the importance of crypto to driving the American economy forward. $100,000 is a nice milestone to say that Bitcoin has emerged onto the scene, and it will be exciting to see where it goes from here.
And then when you think about the trajectory this year, and even if you take it back to the crypto winter, what factors do you think contributed most significantly to this key level?
Yeah, look, Bitcoin is on a 15-year journey of going from obscurity to mainstream status, and it's made steady progress throughout those years. So even during the crypto winter, we had seen that before. It's called a winter because it's followed by a spring and then a summer. We had seen a winter in 2018 and huge years in 2019, 2020, and 21. So we are seeing somewhat of a repeat of that. Of course, the biggest news over the past year was the launch of Bitcoin ETFs,
Yep.
which made it easy for institutional investors to allocate to Bitcoin. That was a major driver, but it wasn't the only one. We also saw corporations like MicroStrategy buying a lot of Bitcoin. We saw institutional investors moving into the space. So that combination lifted us substantially higher.
Well, MicroStrategy is essentially a proxy for Bitcoin at this point. But let's talk about the level of Bitcoin hitting 100,000. We've seen a little bit of cooling since then, but not much, especially when we think about how volatile cryptocurrency can be. What's your view on how this new price point may influence investor behavior?
Well, I think the place to start is with the fact that it's still very early in Bitcoin. I know $100,000 sounds like a lot, but it's not really. Bitcoin doesn't equal gold until we get closer to $1 million a coin. So it's still very early in the development. I do think it's been an important level to get over in order to set the stage for a new rally in 2025. We expected a lot of people to be willing to sell Bitcoin as it approached $100,000. You saw the asset try to get over that level a couple of times and fail. So the fact that it was finally able to get up and over $100,000 means there isn't the same kind of selling resistance that would prevent it to run higher in 2025, which is what we expect here at Bitwise.
So when you think about, 'cause some of the criticism around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general, it's kind of elicited a lot of regulatory scrutiny. Now, it seems like there will obviously be a change, of course, with the new administration. So what do you think, or what's your expectation with regard to regulatory scrutiny or widening adoption of Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, it's really been remarkable to see the change in Washington's attitude toward crypto over the past year. A year ago, we had JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon testifying before Congress that the government should shut down crypto. And now we have, a new incoming chair of the SEC that's strongly pro-crypto. We have David Sachs coming in as the czar of AI and crypto for the United States. We have a pro-crypto administration. It's incredible that Bitcoin and broader crypto had such a strong year last year, despite these regulatory headwinds. Now they're turning into regulatory tailwinds. We'll see clearer examples of how crypto can be regulated that will let entrepreneurs really start building in this space. I think it's a necessary part of crypto moving into the mainstream. And I think you're going to see fast action from the administration on pro-crypto regulatory steps as we enter 2025.
To quote Diamond had also previously called it essentially a pet rock. And some critics still, although there's been some quieting of some of the criticism around Bitcoin and crypto in general, but some critics point out it's difficult to find the use case. What do you say to that?
I think it's pretty easy to see the use case of Bitcoin. It's a non government store of value akin to a digital version of gold. Gold has been a valuable tool for people trying to escape from debasing fiat currencies for many years. It's no surprise that we want a digital equivalent to that. There's a digital equivalent to almost every analog good in the world, right? We have physical newspapers and we have the internet we read online. We have physical ads and we have digital ads. The fact that we are going to have a digital version of gold that occupies the same space, but for a younger, more modern, more tech savvy generation, to me seems almost obvious and intuitive. So I find it odd when people suggest it has no use case. It'd be equivalent to saying gold has no use case. I think we've seen gold's use case, and we see Bitcoin moving into that space and more in the coming years.
So you believe that it has the same store of value that gold does?
I think it's emerging into that space. Again, when Bitcoin gets to be as large as gold, as accepted as gold, held by the same kinds of institutions and central governments as gold, then I suspect you'll see it have a similar volatility and play a similar role in the world as gold. The opportunity for investors, the reason it's so exciting, is they're front running those institutions as they catch up to the fact that we're going to have this digital store of value in the world. Again, once we get to that point, I think Bitcoin will be as boring as gold, but we are a long way from that. And that is the opportunity that faces investors today.
And then let's talk a little bit about one of the other asset classes in this space, Ethereum. It hasn't had the same run that Bitcoin has had this year. Yes, obviously it is up, but the expectation was that it would, kind of be run the same kind of course. What's your view on why that hasn't happened?
Yeah, it's funny you raise that because it started to gain some traction recently, and I think its prospects for 2025 are very strong. Ethereum was sort of sandwiched between two very exciting things happening in crypto. On the one hand, you had Bitcoin, the largest asset with a new ETF and high institutional buying. And then on the other side of it, you had sort of Ethereum challengers, coins like Solana, that were gaining substantial traction. I think Ethereum was sort of lost in the middle. It was going through a technological upgrade that changed its economics, but you're starting to see it turn the corner. When we look at the level of activity taking place on Ethereum's layer 2 networks like Base, which have soared this year, hitting massive new all-time highs, it makes us very opportunistic for the year ahead. So I think of Ethereum as sort of a contrarian bet within the crypto ecosystem. I think the world's warming back up to Ethereum, and I think you'll see strong ETF flows and strong performance for that asset in the year to come.
And speaking of strong performance, XRP has also had some strong performance. And some have talked about even, for critics who argue about the questions about the use case for Bitcoin, say they can find that with XRP. What's your view about the trajectory for XRP?
I think XRP's reaction to the November election is proof that crypto investors are rational and thinking clearly about this market. Amongst all crypto assets, or at least all large cap crypto assets, XRP has rallied the most since the election. And the reason for that is for the past 4 or 5 years, it's faced the center of the regulatory crackdown and sort of the extreme regulatory position taken by the SEC. The idea is that once we get a more balanced approach to regulation, we'll get to see what this blockchain, which has sustained a strong community and has incredibly strong technological capabilities, does when it's opened up into the market. I think there are a lot of people excited to sort of see what XRP can do when it's unfettered by really aggressive regulatory prosecution. And we're going to see that in 2025. And people are betting that it's going to find interesting use cases in the real world.
Speaking of the election, former president, I should say President-elect Trump has taken credit for Bitcoin reaching 100,000. How much influence, if any, do you think his policies or statements had on the milestone?
I think there's a big influence from the change in Washington's attitude toward Bitcoin and towards crypto. Some of it is sort of precise one-to-one. There's talk about the US building a strategic Bitcoin reserve that sparked other countries to look into acquiring Bitcoin. But more, it's just this tone at the top. We've surveyed financial investors for the past 6 years at Bitwise, asking them what's prevented them from allocating to Bitcoin and crypto. The number one thing they cited wasn't valuations or concerns about volatility. What they always cited was regulatory risks, far more than anything else that's been keeping people out of the market. When you have the highest office in the land saying Bitcoin is here to stay and it's important to America, it removes a lot of those regulatory risks. So has it had a big impact? Yes, it's had a big impact. And I think, again, we'll really start to feel the scale of that impact as we go into 2025.
And then speaking of, as we go into 2025, some wonder, are they just too late? What's your outlook for Bitcoin for 2025 and the cryptocurrency landscape in general?
You know, it's a funny thing. I was looking over the CIO memo that I write each week and have been for about 2 years. I was looking back a year ago, and a year ago, the title of my CIO memo was, Am I Too Late? Because at the time, Bitcoin was up over 100%. People thought they had missed the boat. They were optimistic about what would happen in 2024, but they were worried that they were behind the scenes. I think the same thing is true here. Look, there are lots of reasons to be optimistic for 2025. We've talked about the pro-crypto administration. We've talked about all the buying by Bitcoin ETFs, corporations, governments. It's a very opportunistic scenario. I think until Bitcoin is more or less pari passu with gold, on par with gold, you're still early. Could it have a pullback? Of course it could have a pullback. But we're still looking at an asset that's dramatically under-owned by most investors, and I think its brightest days are ahead.
You know how they talk about buying the dip when it comes to equities? Do you have that same view when it comes to cryptocurrency, especially when you see a pullback in, say, Bitcoin, Ethereum, et cetera?
Yeah, I think a lot of investors are well served by dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin. But I'll say this to investors who are thinking about quote unquote buying the dip. If that's what you're going to do, I encourage you now to write down the number at which you would buy Bitcoin. What I've seen too much over the last 10 years in this space is people say, oh, I'll get in when it pulls back by 20% or 25%. But then when it pulls back, they don't feel quite as optimistic and they sit on the sidelines. So if you're going to be someone who hopes for a dip and waits to buy the dip, maybe try writing it down so you have a commitment mechanism to do so if it's right for you. It's just an idea.
A great way to finish this. Our thanks to Matt Hougan, Global Head of Research for Bitwise Asset Management. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
You got it.